Off Limits is the money podcast that blows up stereotypes, showing you that managing money doesn't have to be hard.
We want you to thrive, not only with your money, but in every part of your life.
What you will get out of this podcast is real, relatable, and relevant tips and strategies that you can apply today. Hi, I'm Donald Raymond, and this is
Christine Spiak. We are money coaches, business owners, and colleagues who are passionate about helping you become more of who you are. So if you're ready, join us. Strategies to pay off debt successfully. I'm going to start by what some may think of as a silly question. However, I don't think there's any silly questions. Donald, how do you even know if you're in debt?
Yeah, what a great question, right? So I think a lot of people are going to hear that question and say, what do you mean, how do I know if I'm in debt? Some people are going to think, well, everybody's in debt, and you're probably not wrong. But how do we really define debt, since that's what we're talking about, is strategies to pay the debt off, right? So we want to get on the same page. And the simplest possible definition that we could find and kind of put together for the word debt and how it's going to apply in today's conversation is something, typically money, that is owed, right? Simple. Money or something that is owed back. You borrowed it. Money that you borrowed that you owe back, an item that you borrowed that you owed back, a friend, a family member, a loan that you, a loan agreement, a contract that you signed to pay over time. Any of these things, a debt product, a credit product like a credit card, all of these things are going to fall into that category of debt if we look at it this way. So how do you answer that question? How do you know if you're in debt? Well, you can ask yourself a series of questions. So Christine, am I in debt if I'm making payments on something?
Yes, you are.
Am I in debt if I owe a balance on an item to anybody?
Yes, you are.
How about if I borrowed money or an item from a family member or a friend?
You sure are.
I'm in debt. And then what about, so this one gets subjective, or not really subjective, but it gets a lot of attention, especially in today's economy and kind of worldview. What about loan products that are suspended or furloughed for a time?
It is still your debt.
It's still owed. We still have a debt, right? So if we just look at the basic definition, if there's a balance out there of any kind that has your name attached to it, or whether it's a handshake agreement or a formal contract, and you borrowed something, specifically money, and you owe that money back over a time period, over a series of payments, or even just one payment, we're going to look at that as a debt, whether you've built it into your cash flow or not. So knowing that, that's going to help us kind of set the foundation for everything else that we talk about as it's related to debt. And what we want to do today is focus on, how do we erase it? How do we get all of the debt out of our lives? Right?
And not only how do we get it out, but how do we accelerate the progress we're making on paying it off?
So not just get rid of it, but get rid of it as fast as possible.
Yes. Yeah. Oftentimes people feel the payment that they are making, because they can afford the payment, they don't view the item as a debt. Does that make sense?
It does to me, and well, I say it does. I mean, I know what you're saying. Does it make sense with my financial philosophy, with the philosophy I have for how we manage our finance? Absolutely not. You know, if I owe a payment to something and I don't own that item 100%, free and clear, 100% of the asset belongs to me, then I have debt on that item to somebody, and that doesn't fit within my program. So does it make sense? Yes, I understand. Do I invite that into our household? I do not, and I don't subscribe to that. And I definitely encourage people to reduce or eliminate as much as possible, which can be overwhelming if you've got a lot of it.
Right. Absolutely. And I think the reason why it's so overwhelming is because, first of all, we just view oftentimes debt as just a payment and not in its entirety of the total loan balance, if you will. Just I'll word it that way. If we were to zoom out and look at all of the balances added up, all of the payments added up, that's where it really gets overwhelming. And it's like, well, let me just look back down. Yes, I can afford this a payment. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and in today's world, payments have kind of taken on, they've morphed a little bit, right? So we can have payments on anything. You know, you can buy a $10 t-shirt and make 4 easy payments on $10 t-shirts, right? And as an individual purchase, like you said, it doesn't feel like a lot, but at any given moment in time, if you can really assess all of the debt that you have out there and then total up the sum of all those payments, that is now in total your debt burden that hits your cash flow every month. And that is how much of a financial commitment out of your income, your paycheck, that you've already committed to before it even shows up. So whether that's, 10%, 15%, 20, 50, 60% of your paycheck, that paycheck's already gone. That amount of your paycheck is already gone. It's already spoken for before you even got it. And that's why, we really want to encourage people to reduce their debt position, because so much of it is being taken away before they've even earned it. And the worst part of that is if your life situation changes and your income is affected by that. What happens when that income goes away? That's really where debt becomes a huge risk that we can manage and reduce.
A great visual that I want to share with everybody as you just talked through all of those points is picture yourself in the driver's seat of a car and you're looking out the rear view mirror. It's a very tiny mirror that you're looking out behind you. That's what your debt is. When you're getting paid today, you have to go back in time to make all of the payments that you have. Now, picture yourself in that same driver's seat, but you're looking out the windshield. That windshield is, I have no idea how many times bigger than the size of the rear view mirror. 100? I don't know.
Easily call it 100 times. Yep.
Right. So now you're looking out this windshield towards your future. And when you get paid, if you don't have to look out the rearview mirror and make payments to your past, then 100% of that paycheck can go towards your future. And that will dramatically change the way you live your life.
No, I agree. Looking forward is so much more motivating than looking backwards, right? And there's a reason that the rearview mirror is smaller. You're only supposed to glance at the rearview mirror every now and then, and it's for information. Is somebody running up, fast behind my vehicle? Do I have room to move the vehicle over? It's for these little, quick, short-term, one-time decisions that is just a very small part of the overall goal, right? And if you're driving somewhere, you're headed somewhere, and that's what the windshield is for. The windshield, the side windows, all of those things are much bigger and give us more vision of where we're going. And hopefully we have in mind a target. We're headed somewhere. So if we apply that to, our lives, I've always found that it's much more motivating for myself and for my clients to look out ahead as far as possible. And if it's not something that you're used to doing, you don't look too far. But you start to kind of challenge yourself to make a 6-month, 12-month, 18-month goal and then move toward it and just keep pushing that 18-month goal out farther, right? So, today, 18 months is a year and a half from today, but in 6 months, it'll be a year and a half from 6 months from now, right? Which would be 2 years from today. So you just keep pushing the 18 months forward. And then if you can get it to 3 years, 10 years, now you really have a much bigger picture. And as you adjust the variables and kind of cascade those forward of the amount of debt you're going to be able to pay off within that time, you start putting dates on the calendar of when that debt is going to be paid off. You start to really get motivated. You get energized, and that helps you accelerate the program because now you see what's possible. You're not limiting yourself to life with debt. You're removing that limitation, and you're starting to live, even if only mentally, you're starting to live a life after debt, right? A life without the debt. And you're making decisions now based on an expected amount of income that you now have 100% control over because you don't have a significant portion of it going to those debts.
Yes, absolutely. And hope starts here. So, everything Donald just said, if you find yourself resonating with that, or as he's speaking, you're thinking through all of those points, use today to be your window of time that you choose a different path to accelerate paying off your debt so you can be in that driver's seat looking out the windshield, not the rear view mirror. One point that I think is really important to make, though, don't hear everything we're saying and feel like we're criticizing you or judging you for the debt that you have. Donald and I in our life have both had debt. We've both been in your shoes. Whether it's a medical debt from being in the hospital, having a child, whether it's student loan debt because you went to college and you have a degree in teaching and now you're a teacher and you're changing lives every day, whether it's credit card debt because you took a family vacation, even though it's 2 or 3 years later, you're still paying for it. You made those decisions at that time because you felt that was best for your life, to serve your life. Maybe they were impulsive and you didn't even want them anyways, but don't criticize yourself or be shameful about it. Use the information as knowledge and power to help you decide how you want to spend your money in the future.
No, that's right. We should never feel bad about the decisions we've made. They've only gotten us to where we are and given us the information that we have. And, sometimes you need an experience to learn from it. And whether it's a good or a bad experience, you can repeat something or you can make a decision not to repeat it. And so all of those decisions require those experiences. And so you've been living your life and you've been making decisions that are in the best interest of yourself and your family and the people that depend on you. And nobody should ever feel bad about that. So so continue to do that, but now with more information. Now that you've had some experiences, maybe you've started feeling, if you're still watching this episode, maybe you're somebody that is feeling the pressure and the weight and the burden of this cash flow situation because now for the first time you've acquired so many things and you've taken on so much more responsibility that now more than half of the majority of your paycheck is now going toward this debt. Or maybe it's been that way for a while and you're starting to wonder if there's a better way. Is there something that I can do to change this, to start moving away from this? And, while it's important not to hold yourself accountable in a critical way to the decisions you made that got you here, because some of those may have been planned, some of those may have been surprises. And, that's just kind of the way life works sometimes. Just as much, you need to remember that it took time to get to where you are, and it's going to take time to get to where you're going. You can accelerate it if you're ultra focused on it and you're just committed to it and you'll make any and every sacrifice. But just understand that any change, no matter what it is, takes time. And while you can be committed to the outcome, it's going to take as long as it's going to take to get there.
We just want you to be intentional about it.
Yes.
Focused, diligent.
So we've got some ways to
Yep.
maybe help with that, right? We've got some different strategies we're going to talk about today that maybe you've tried, maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't, but we're gonna try to unpack a few real actionable strategies for you that you can apply, and you can start applying most of these, if not all of these, right away to your goal, your effort, your intention to reduce or eliminate debt.
We're going to start with the debt snowball method because that's the method Donald and I both used in our individual households to pay down our debt. The method itself is essentially 3 steps. First, you're going to list your debt smallest to largest based on the total loan balance, not interest rate. So the total loan balance lists them smallest to largest. Then you're going to start paying as much as you can on the smallest debt while paying minimum payments on all of the remaining debts. Once the first debt, the smallest debt, is paid off, you are going to take the minimum payment you are making on that, plus whatever extra you can, and now roll that into the second debt. So now on the second debt, you have minimum payment from number 1, minimum payment from that debt, and anything extra that you can put on that until that debt is paid off. And then you go on to number 3. So you can see how the snowball, how this method works, how it just keeps rolling into the third and then the fourth and so on until all of your non-mortgage debt is paid off.
And the visual behind that is the snowball, right? We start out with a small little handmade snowball that fits in the palm of your hand. You put it down, you roll it down the hill, or you roll it up on a flat area. But as you roll it, more and more snow continues to stick to the ball, right? And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's the base of your snowman. Well, that's the idea, right? We're starting with the smallest, and then we're working our way up to the largest, and we're adding all of these payments, all of these minimum payments together to do it. So we're taking on a little more snow, a little more snow, a little more snow. But I do want to pause real quick, Christine. You did a great job talking about how the application of paying these off. But I have had so many people misunderstand this principle over time where they think, okay, I'm only paying the smallest debt. And that will get you in trouble fast. If you're only paying on your smallest debt and you're ignoring any other debts, now you're incurring penalties. And now the wrong snowball is growing. You've now got a problem where you're incurring penalties and you're incurring interest and late fees on these other debts because you thought you were applying the snowball method, but it just, for whatever reason, wasn't explained correctly or was misunderstood and wrongly applied. So just remember that you have to continue to make good on any outstanding debt, which means you're maintaining those minimum payments so that while you may be incurring interest, you are not incurring any additional penalties. And that is what's going to help this method be successful.
And something that is also important to point out, which I'm glad you mentioned, that when you're making the minimum payments, you can't just set it and forget it.
That's right.
If you have a loan that has a variable interest rate and that interest rate changes, well, then you really have to make sure you're paying attention and staying on top of that and changing your minimum payment when that interest rate changes.
So this stuff really takes work, and for all of these strategies, really the first thing you want to do, like Christine said, is make a list. But then maybe the second thing you want to do is contact every one of your lenders. Anybody, any debt collector out there, anybody that you owe money to, contact them. Make sure you understand what your options are and what your responsibilities are. And then if there's a chance to negotiate any of them, go ahead and do that. Just take the opportunity to start negotiating those right then and there. If you can lock into an interest rate, if you could reduce a burden, if you can agree on a payoff amount, anything you can do to lower that burden, have the conversation. It never hurts to ask the question.
And that applies to not just this debt snowball method, but every
Everything.
method that we're going to talk about today. Absolutely.
Yeah. So do we want to? Can I introduce maybe the next one? Are we done on the snowball?
I think so. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. So we're staying in the mountains, and but this time we're looking at an avalanche. And the avalanche method, instead of the smallest payment, is going to look at the highest interest rate. We're going to tackle these by the highest interest-bearing account first, still maintaining minimum payments on everything else. We've still done all our homework. We've talked to all of our lenders, all of our debt collectors. We understand what our responsibilities are, and we've made a list of all of our accounts and we've sorted them from the highest interest rate down. And we're going to start paying down that highest interest rate with any additional financial resources that we can free up. So once our needs are covered, the way that we do that, right, is we identify what those needs are with a budget, and we make sure that those payments are made, and then hopefully there's an amount that's left over from that exercise, and then we can apply that to this highest interest rate. That gets that one paid off. We take those payments, we push them right into the next one, next highest interest rate, and on it goes. And we call that the avalanche.
So when we're talking about the debt snowball and the debt avalanche, they're very similar methods with two different approaches, whether it's the smallest loan minimum payment or it's the highest interest rate. Ironically, you're not really coming out ahead if you start with the highest interest rate. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to really save a lot of money by doing it that way. You really finish about the same time when comparing the two methods.
That's right. There's not going to be a huge advantage to one over the other, no matter which one of these you pick. If you stick with it, run the program, depending on how much debt you have, everybody's going to have a different amount of debt, and their payoff date might be different between everybody's situation. But if you have two people with the same, let's say we've got two people out there with the same debts, same balances, same everything. And we have one person work the snowball and another person is going to work the avalanche. They've got the same income, same resources. They're going to finish at about the same time. The difference is the motivator. Which one gets you going? Which one fires you up? Which one do you kind of have a natural bias for? And maybe as we've been talking about them, you already have started to develop a bias toward one over the other. You think maybe the avalanche really is something that you could get behind, or you're somebody that could really get behind the snowball. And the idea here is there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. You pick one and you run that one all the way through until those debts are gone.
Yep, you got it. If we look at our third option or method that we're going to talk about today, that's the highest payment. Now, maybe you're just feeling so much burden like, man, I have X dollars a month going on this one payment. If I didn't have that one payment, I could really accelerate paying off my other debts, or I can make progress on another goal. So maybe for you, the motivator is get this one highest payment knocked out so you can free up that money.
Yeah, you might even be avoiding it, right? Maybe you're making that minimum payment and you're trying to pretend that it just doesn't it's not real. It doesn't exist. Just put it out of your mind, right? You've negotiated a payment you can live with and you've just kind of accepted it, but think about how good it would feel to get rid of it. And then sort them, right? Same exercise here. Sort them highest to lowest. And this one fits nicely with our next one, which you already used the word, Christine. It's burden, right? Which one is the biggest burden? Which one is that emotional anchor and holding you back, and would be the most freeing? Would kind of remove some of that emotional weight from getting it out from under you or out from over you, getting out from underneath this big burden of a debt that's just out there, and you kind of have remorse, right? You wish you had never made that purchase, you wish that thing had never happened, and you just want it gone. That would be this fourth strategy called biggest burden, where we're going to sort the emotional connection to all our debts and the one that would feel the best to get rid of first.
And that could be a loan to a family member. That
Yeah.
could be maybe a credit card payment that the interest rate is so high that you just see how much money is going to interest every month and you're barely touching the principal, and that just fires you up. That gets you so frustrated and you want that one gone. Whatever it may be for you, that if it's an emotional burden, the anchor, how Donald mentioned, if that's anchoring you down and prohibiting you from truly living the life you choose, right? We say that a lot. Then get that one gone. Start with that one first.
And it's important to remember that for this strategy, the amounts are not what we're not looking at the dollar figures. It's not the highest interest rate, it's not the highest balance, it's not the lowest balance. It's the one that just bothers you the most. And it might be the smallest debt. So it's not the amount that we're looking at here. It's just the one, you talk about the family member. It's that thing that is having the biggest impact, on your life. And so we want to attack that one first. So,
Right. Maybe
so
it's
once
keeping you
you,
up at night.
that's right. Yeah, there you go. The one that's keeping you up at night. And you want to figure out, what's going to be the strategy that's going to motivate you the best, because ultimately that's the one that's going to have the most success, right? And it's going to be the one that's going to propel you forward farther, faster, because it's the one that you connect with the most.
So, if we take a look at our action steps for this lesson, I think as we continue talking through those, you're really going to be able to determine which one of these methods is right for me. So, we've said it a lot, but I'm going to say it again. The first thing you want to do is take an inventory of your non mortgage debt. We're leaving the mortgage out of this because that's going to be a beast that you're going to want to address once all of your other non mortgage debt is paid off. So take that inventory. For each debt, you're going to list three things. You're going to list the total balance, you're going to list your minimum payment, and you're going to list the interest rate. That way, you have a complete picture on each debt when you're looking at them to determine which method you want to use as your strategy.
Yeah, and we said going into this season, that this is going to be the season for the nerds, right? And so action step number one, we're going to take all this data and you're going to start charting the data. And this gives you the ability, if you want to, if you're the, the nerd, if you're the one, the analyst in the family, if that's just, if you're like me, then you're going to want to chart these out and you're going to want to figure out on paper which one mathematically makes the most sense. Now, remember, we said it's not the one mathematically that wins that is going to have the best success for you. So keep that in the back of your mind. It's the one that you align with the most. It's the one that you have the most connection to. The strategy that really feels the best to you is going to be the one that you're going to have the most success with. So do the math to figure out, because I would do the math and I'd look at the amount, I'd look at the interest rate, and I would make a decision based on what these minimum payments are, what that interest rate looks like, how over time, depending on how long this is going to take, is this going to have a greater impact. And you're going to find, like we said before, they're all going to finish at about the same time, but there will be some differences just because the structure of all these loans and all these payments is going to be a little bit different. And as you pay those down, there's going to be a mathematical advantage to one of them. But if you don't align with that, if you don't agree to it, if you don't subscribe to it, if in your mind you're in that emotional biggest burden category, but mathematically you're looking at the highest interest rate, so you're doing the avalanche, you may not be as committed, and so you may not have that success.
Right. We want this information to be a motivator. Again, going back to what we said earlier on, don't shame yourself. Don't feel like, man, if
That's right.
only I did this. Don't go there, right? Give yourself permission where I am only using this information to go forward. I'm not looking back with regret. And then use it as a motivator. If you tally up your monthly minimum payments and you see that number is $1,600 a month, $2,700 a month, use that information to say, what would I do in an environment where I don't have any debt? Where would that money go each month? What would I be spending it on? Am I donating more? Am I traveling
Right.
more? Am I saving for future purchases? How am I setting myself up for success in the future because I don't have this debt today?
When you start laying out that future projection, you start looking ahead and you start really putting together what that life would look like. You need to take into consideration not just eliminating the debt, but you start actually paying yourself that additional paycheck, that $1,600, $1,700, $2,500. I had a client last year that had $7,900 in payments due. And, they had the income to support it and it was a percentage of their income. But that's why the numbers sometimes are kind of irrelevant. It's more about what would you do different without those burdens. How would your life change? Would you work the same job you're working? Would it free you up to maybe pursue a different career or an opportunity to invest more in family and community? Just think about everything and really be honest with yourself about what would be different, and make sure that you're putting that paycheck back in, because that's a piece I see a lot of people miss is, they run it out and they see what their income looks like without the debt, but they're not paying themselves back for the debt that they're not paying anymore.
That's right.
Right.
That's
And so
right.
you want to make sure that you're not just including it, but you're actually seeing it as almost like an extra paycheck.
It's a pay raise.
It's a pay raise. Exactly right.
Yep.
It's a pay raise.
Yep.
So I hope that makes sense. But that's another reason we don't put the mortgage payment into it, because it's this huge anomaly for almost everybody. It's going to be the biggest and longest term contract that you have. And so it just wouldn't make sense, even though it might be the lowest interest rate. It wouldn't make sense to try to pay it off somewhere in the mix, right? It wouldn't make sense as a highest balance to try to pay off your mortgage first, because if you're at a 15 or God forbid a 30-year mortgage, well then you would never have the opportunity to pay any of these other debts off. And so we do want to pay the mortgage off. We absolutely want to get rid of all debt, but the mortgage stays out of this piece of the conversation simply because it always fits in the same place. And so there's a whole separate effort given to the mortgage.
I'll play devil's advocate only because I know this to be true for some people,
Yeah.
that their student loan debt outweighs their mortgage debt. And that is a harsh reality.
Isn't that crazy?
For many people.
Yeah. And that's a growing statistic. It's not a majority yet, but it is getting there.
Yep. Yep.
Especially and I think one of the things that's driving that, not to get totally derailed, but for a lot of people are going to resonate with what you just said, this student loan crisis that we're in. So I'll just say that, one of the things that's driving that is the student loan debt is preventing a lot of people from becoming homeowners. And so that's one of the variables that's driving that percentage up is fewer people are becoming homeowners because they simply can't afford to. They don't qualify because of their student debt.
That's right. And maybe just it'll be important to touch on really quickly, if your student loan debt right now is in deferment or forbearance or on pause through the federal government, you may be thinking, hey, I'm not even going to include this in my equation. But we absolutely want you to.
Absolutely.
It is still your debt. You still owe the money. You're still responsible for paying it back.
Remember the definition. Anything that is owed, right? So even if you're not responsible for the payments right now, you still owe that money back. So we have to fit it into the equation, like you say, because if you don't, and maybe this forbearance is ended, and all of a sudden, they impose maybe some makeup payments into your schedule, you're going to be in bad shape if you haven't been planning for that.
Yep, absolutely. So, as we've been talking, we've been kind of just flowing through the action steps. So, I'm going to just take a minute to back up. So, step one is to take that inventory. Then, step two is totaling up that minimum monthly payment and looking at what is that balance? What is the balance of the total loan column? Then, step three, what stands out to you, right? Is it how much of your monthly income is going towards your debt? Is it the interest rate? Man, I had no idea that was a variable interest rate on this loan. And I just learned that it's going to be going up to this percentage. Maybe is it a debt that carries a heavy burden, right? It's that emotional anchor that we were talking about. So that really is step three. As we move on into step four, now you're going to weigh the pros and cons of each method: the snowball, the avalanche, the highest payment, and the biggest burden. Now you have your pros and cons, and you're going to move into step five, which is identifying which method is the best strategy for you.
And we always want to make decisions with the information that we have at the time. And so, this is another one of those themes that you're going to hear on this show a lot. We make the best decisions we can with the information that we have, but you're always getting new information. And so once you get to step five, you're going to make a call. You're going to make a decision to go in a certain direction, right? You're going to have all this information. You're going to have done some initial analysis. You're going to have made a decision based on what you know, and you're going to start moving in that direction. And that's exactly how you should be approaching this. After you've got all the inputs, you've connected with all of your lenders, you know what all of your options are, you know what your responsibilities are, you know what the mathematical advantage says, and you've taken into consideration how you feel about your situation. And potentially, if you're in a family environment, right, you've got a spouse, a partner, husband, wife, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, whoever's in your home, right, contributing to this debt, or whoever you owe, how that's going to affect, that overall situation, that lifestyle that you're in. Now you're in a place where you can make an informed decision. And that's where we always want to be. We want to make informed decisions intentionally that align us with our goals and our actions and our values.
You got it.
Yeah.
Well said. Now we're moving on to step six. And this is where it gets a little fun, because now you're going to start tracking your progress. Whether you're creating an old school thermometer and you're going to color it in based on the order of which the debts that you're going to be paying off. Maybe it's going on a website like Debt Free Charts and you're printing out a chart. So you have a chart that's a picture of a car. And every time you make a car payment or put extra money on the car, you're coloring it in. Or it's your, medical bill and it's another chart. Maybe it's just one chart that you're using for all of your debt, but you're setting milestones. For every $500 I'm making, I get to color in this much every time I hit a milestone. The point being, tracking your progress, seeing it visually keeps you inspired to make better choices and to keep going. That's the whole point of tracking it.
Because this does take time. We said that already. And it's easy to get motivated. You listen to the episode, you're going to go, some of you are going to run out there, or maybe you've already started pulling it up on your phone. What are my debts? I want to sort them, organize them. By the time the episode's over, I'm going to have a decision made about what direction I'm going. And that's great. And you're going to have that energy on day 1, 2, and 3. But, 4, 5, 6 months into this, you're going to start feeling that weight push back on you. And it's going to be hard to keep going forward. So tracking your progress, being able to look in the rearview mirror and say, okay, I just eliminated this much of my debt in this much time. And now I've got a bigger snowball. Now my avalanche is moving faster. Now, Dave Ramsey talks about a bigger shovel, right? Whatever implement you're using, it gets bigger as you move through the process. So you remind yourself, I made this much progress with a small tool, right? With the small hammer. Now going forward, I got a little handheld sledgehammer, right? My tool got bigger, and I'm able to get ahead that much faster now. So I can project out, and maybe I can adjust my target date to be able to pay all these things off. And yes, you get to have fun with this one. We've had traffic lights. We've had where red, yellow, green was like a spending limit throughout the month. How are we tracking on our spending? And you change the light to indicate to the household how you're looking for the month, and then you use that same kind of visual to illustrate where you are in the debt snowball or in the debt avalanche as you're paying down that debt, and you're getting closer to that green light, right, where you can kind of open up the gates a little bit. If it's a long time, then you'd probably want to have several milestones along the way where you can trigger that green light and just motivate everybody and do a little bit of, quick, momentary, inexpensive celebration. Refuel, reignite that fire, that inspiration, that motivation to keep going and get to the next milestone. Because while the milestones are good, it's the finish line, right, that really makes a big difference.
You're in a marathon. You're not in a sprint. You're not in a microwave. You're in a crock pot. And when you think of it that way, then you know you're in it for the long haul. And each action you take is going to get you closer there. Now, if we're looking at our chart, right, and we're really close to hitting the next milestone or paying off, your first debt or your 10th debt, you may also say, what can I do to accelerate this? And maybe that's getting a side hustle. Maybe it's asking for overtime at work. Maybe it's selling some stuff. Anything you can do to throw extra money at your debt is going to accelerate your progress even faster. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning that we didn't earlier on in step one that I would be remiss if we ended this episode without mentioning it. If you have really no idea how much debt you have, run a credit report that will list out all of your debts, and it may even highlight some debt that you didn't even know you had.
No, it's a good call. And even, we talked about fraud in a previous episode. It's those credit reports, those annual credit reports are important. So yes, I mean, the two kind of foundational things that it's the credit report, getting your information. Where are you now? And how can you get a complete picture of what that looks like? Maybe you're making some active payments, so you know those, but you've forgotten about some other ones that maybe got deferred or got sold to another lender. Maybe you haven't made new contact. Maybe somebody has cloned you, and there are some open accounts out there. Hopefully they're not being used, but if they're open and they shouldn't be, you want to get control over that, and then contacting all of your lenders and all of your debt collectors, making sure that you understand what those burdens are. That information is critical to be able to do any of this and be successful with it. So don't overlook some of those smaller. And I use the word trivial. It's probably not the right word, but they feel kind of trivial, right? It's sort of a take it or leave it. But don't treat them that way. They're important. It's part of the equation, so you can't really ignore those variables.
Right. Be intentional about all of your debts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're going to move into step 7, and that's stretching your income by using a budget. The budget comes up in pretty much every episode we talk about because it's so foundational into having healthy money habits. But not only are you stretching your money by using the budget, you're also being intentional. So let's go back to that debt snowball method that we talked about. If you're paying minimum payments on all of your debts except for the smallest, well, now when you're writing out that budget for the month, and each month is going to vary, you'll see how much extra you have that you can throw at your debt. And then adding on to that, now you may be looking, okay, Donald mentioned the shovel or the hammer. It's not big enough. Well, maybe when you're doing this budget, you realize, okay, I do need to get that side hustle. I do need to work overtime, or I need to apply for another job altogether because I just need to throw more money at this problem so I can reduce it and really ultimately eliminate it altogether.
Yeah, I heard recently, I heard someone saying, I can't remember who it was, but it went kind of like this. You're limited to how much you can save, but there is no limit to how much you can earn. You're only limited by your skills, the amount of time you're willing to commit to it. You can always make more money, and you will earn for the rest of your life if you apply these principles. You may not work in the traditional way for the rest of your life, but you will be earning for the rest of your life if you apply all of this, everything that we teach. So knowing that, saving may not be, even though initially you think, okay, I just won't spend in these certain areas and I'll apply whatever surplus I have by taking away some things to get these debts out of the way. Yes, that helps. It may not help as much as you expect it to, and it most certainly is not going to be the biggest thing that you can do. That's not to say that it's not important and you shouldn't do that. You absolutely should. You have to make sacrifices to make change, but it probably is not going to be the most significant, the most impactful piece of the puzzle. Earning more, selling more. I can tell you just personal experience. We had a couple of yard sales when we started our process here in the house. When we, initially got started, we just kind of used it as a clean sweep effort, and we went through a spring cleaning. We got a yard sale together, and we used all of that income to offset some of our existing debt. And it launched us much farther than we anticipated into the next milestone, right? And so we kind of had that vision, we cascaded it forward, we earned a little bit of extra income, and that was a trigger for me at least where I realized all of a sudden, yes, I can save and I can stop spending as much over here and I can just move that over here, but every extra dollar I can bring in has a huge impact on my ability to make progress. And so yeah, there's a lot of different ways to make money these days that are totally legal, totally ethical. You can do them from home. They're online. Everybody's got skills in all these different options that are out there. Whether it's writing and doing transcripts, or if you're doing some kind of sales or customer service, all of these things can be done online, and they can be done at your convenience. You can do them over the evening hours and the nighttime hours, like getting a second degree or finishing college online, and flexible schedules and being able to do all these things. There's so much opportunity out there. There's really no excuse not to do them anymore. So if you've got a need and you've got a skill, just connect those two dots and go find an income, a revenue stream that you can get for that.
Yep. And it doesn't mean you have to do it forever. Let's say you're eliminating
right.
something from your budget. It doesn't mean you're going to go the rest of your life without that, or you're getting a second job or working overtime. It doesn't mean you're doing it forever. It just means you're doing it for a time. So it's a means to an end.
We're getting rid of this debt. Yep.
Yes.
That's the focus
Yes.
right now. Yep.
Yep. The next step is, okay, you paid off your debt. The next step is you paid off your first debt. Celebrate it, right? That is so important. And then also evaluate the method that you're using. If it was the biggest burden and that one's gone, if you don't have another debt that has that emotional weight on you, now maybe you want to reevaluate and say, okay, which method do I want to use? The snowball, the avalanche, or the highest payment? Once you identify that, then choose that plan and keep moving forward. And then finally, our last step for you is during this process, don't take on any new debt, because all you're going to do is prolong how long it takes you to get out of debt. So stop using those credit cards, stop borrowing money from family, stop taking out loans, live with the intention of, from here on out, I am cash flowing the purchases that I am making. If I can't cash flow it, then I am not going to do it. And again, you're not doing it for a period of time. Once your debt is paid off, all of that money, right? Earlier we threw out $1,600, $2,700. Donald said $7,900 in an extreme example, right? Now you can really do anything you want with that money.
Yeah, and this is a good spot to just comment briefly. Debt consolidation in general is not a helpful tool. Those programs exist for a reason. They're in it to make money. They do exist, at least by definition, to be a service to some. But in general, if you do all the things that we described, you're going to be a better option for yourself than a debt consolidator. So don't, again, with this idea of not taking on new debt, what a lot of people don't really fully understand or accept about debt consolidation is that you are taking on a new debt. You are replacing several debts with one new primary debt. And it starts to kind of feel like a second mortgage. And that makes it very difficult to manage and get rid of. And so applying these steps, applying these tools, these actions into your life, and just being intentional about it, later on, you're going to hear us talk about things like being self-insured. And so this is an area where you can be your own debt consolidator, and you can have a greater impact, be more effective than somebody else can in this way. And so take it on yourself, and don't try to get somebody else involved that says maybe they can help you faster and put this burden behind you and reduce your burden and all those things. Just remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And you don't need this other service probably for most situations. And I say that because there are extremes, there are scenarios. There's always a scenario where something like that might be necessary. Something like bankruptcy might be necessary, but it's always going to be way, way down on the list. And in most cases, if not all cases, it doesn't need to be part of the equation. You'll be able to do this if you apply these steps.
Right. I was going to mention bankruptcy also, so I'm glad that you did.
Yeah.
That is a really extreme option. follow these steps and you can get yourself there most of the time, right? We're not going to talk in absolutes. The other thing is refinancing. Donald mentioned consolidation. If you're sitting there with a lot of student loan debt and you're thinking, for example, and you're thinking, I want to refinance, a couple of things that are really important to highlight is you don't want to refinance for a longer term. So again, if something sounds too good to be true, it likely is.
That's right.
If it does make sense for you, make sure you're making the informed decision, you're doing your research, and you're not putting yourself off in worse off shape. You're making a decision that's going to put you in a better situation moving forward.
Yep, all the variables, right? So they might say we can lower your payment, but what they're not telling you is they're going to roll a fee into the new structure and they're going to stretch out your term. So over time, you're going to pay a whole lot more, but you're going to get your monthly payment down. Well, that doesn't actually do you any good unless you're in one of these extreme scenarios.
Right. So let's leave our listeners with a little motivation with our quote today and then our book recommendation.
Let's go.
So the quote is, becoming debt-free is about more than just paying off debt. It's about discovering freedom, flexibility, and control over your life, your finances, and your future. This is unknown. I found this on Pinterest. I wish I said it myself because I think this is so clear in what truly paying off debt does for you.
Yeah, and it summarizes the episode today, right? Life after debt. Maybe we should change the title. I don't know. But the just this whole idea that, it's not just about getting rid of the debt, right? It's about what your life looks like after the debt is gone. It's about what you can do with the income you have, with the tools at your disposal, with the resources, the time, the skills. How would your life look different without debt? And that's really where you start. You start to get the vision for what life would look like without it, and then you start moving in that direction. And then our book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I don't know if you took this away from today's video or episode, but habits, right? Behaviors. I said it in the definition. We talked about debt. We talked about replacing bad habits with good habits. We talked about intentionality. Atomic Habits really fits the theme well. And while it's not directly associated with paying off debt, it is indirectly going to help you in the process because you're going to learn tools and techniques on how to develop habits, what some good habits are, and just kind of a general understanding of how to control your habits, how to develop habits, and how to have discipline around habits. And once you have that structure, you can accomplish lots of things. And if you put that focus toward debt retirement, then you'll accomplish that goal as well.
Absolutely. It's a great book recommendation. Thank you for sharing it with our audience and myself. It's been on my list for a long time. My list keeps growing. I don't know how I'm ever going to read all the books.
Same here.
Probably in retirement. You told me earlier that your mom reads, almost 2 books a day. That'll probably be me in retirement.
There you go.
I'll be soaking it all up. Well, thank you again for listening to our episode. We are obviously very passionate about the information that we share with you. And you've heard a lot of our perspective, our opinions, our thoughts, our strategies. So next time we are going to be interviewing a financial advisor, and we're going to ask her some of the questions that you all have, that we have, to help all of us understand how that piece, building wealth, fits into this overall idea of healthy money habits and creating strategies, putting processes in place to help us build wealth and live the life we choose and not be held back by our debt or our money burdens or stresses.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to have that conversation because one thing we all know is that the market just keeps changing, right? The variables keep changing. The strategies, though, tend to move a little bit slower, and so it'll be interesting to have that conversation. And we haven't had it yet, so I'm looking forward to it, and looking forward to learning something and asking some of those questions and giving some of that value back to our listeners. So stick around for that one; it'll be a good conversation.
Can't wait. All right. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna rephrase that. I don't like to say can't wait. I am looking forward to it.
Same
I do
here.
not want to rush life away. So I am looking forward to that episode and our next time together. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Off Limits.
Beyond the podcast, we are money coaches who want to help you.
So if you are looking for help managing your money, use the links in the description below to contact either of us and learn how coaching can help you thrive.
Lastly, please help us to spread the word by subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing our podcast with your friends and family.